Hello, everyone. I'm Gada Kadoda. Um, while changing the model is the challenge assigned to me in this event, where I will tell you a story revolving around the problem of energy. Against the odds carries two kinds of odds. The first is typical of changing any model, but the second odds are to do with the current situation where I am, Sudan. In short, after our glorious revolution that toppled a 30-year military Islamist dictatorship in 2019, and while we were halfway through our transitional period, a military coup occurred. So since October 25th, we returned back to massive street protests to face the remnants and militias of the old regime, as well as much repression and oppression, and more agonizingly, we return to the active killing fields in Darfur and of the young revolutionaries on the front lines in Khartoum and other revolting cities and towns. Those in the room who come from countries that toppled long dictatorships or lived through revolutions would know how I feel now. But we will never surrender. Never. Long live the revolution and power to the people of Sudan as they realize their dream of freedom, peace, and justice in a civilian state, and to people everywhere fighting against injustices. I'll dedicate this talk to the martyrs of the Sudanese revolution. And I want to thank the Senate of Chile for this invitation to participate in this amazing event, the Congreso Futuro. And to the organizers, I want to especially thank Valentina for putting up with my difficult situation of internet outages and other problems that come with a coup, such as the logistic and the mental effects. The good thing is that I'm not going far from the topic of the revolution, because the story I'll be telling you about is about a quiet revolution that started 13 years ago and is led by the solar mamas of Sudan, who bring light to their rural communities. We know that half the world's population cannot have access to light. In Sudan, the national grid only covers 40% of the population, and that population is predominantly urban centers. So rural Sudan is mostly dark, and these women have to change this situation as we change the model. I will start with how changing the model has been what I needed and still trying to do in my quest for a decent human role, which required me to work on bridging the gap between my academic training and the real world. This cartoon depicts the gap I have always thought about since my undergraduate years at the University of Khartoum, and wondered how it can be bridged. From a computer scientist who specialized in my doctorate in software engineering, and more specifically, formal or mathematical software development methods, that make me not look very different from this guy in the coat, to someone who is aware and can engage with the problems of the person on the other side. After I finished my graduate years and embarked on my academic career, first in England, then in Barbados, I found that I was more and more drawn to projects that are socially relevant and to solving local problems in a way where I understand the concept, the context, and incorporate local knowledge systems. Perhaps my very first few steps in changing the model, it was my first PhD student at the University of the West Indies back in 2003, where we looked at the application of artificial intelligence to the problem of flooding that affects small island states like Barbados. Part of this work involved eliciting local knowledge on assessing and maintaining suck wells, which are a natural water disposal system that is fundamental component of the island's drainage system, but whose knowledge resides in the minds of local experts and not in flood risk management literature. Some years later, I found a concept that bridges just this gap: appropriate technology, and joined the movement through the International Network on Appropriate Technology, which defines appropriate technology as technology to empower people. We advanced the notion that engineering presents opportunities to solve global problems and to meet the basic needs of the world's population. We think that human-centered technologies can promote better health, better education, bring improved access to clean water, necessary shelter, nutritious food, as well as transportation and energy solutions that do not cause ecological imbalance. And to my luck, in one of our conferences that was in Kigali in 2008, I found an example of an approach that actually does change the model, the barefoot model, that just clicked with me, and I have been on it ever since. My story with this approach, which is entwined with that of with the Sudanese solar mamas, will be the focus of the rest of my talk. This is Bunker Roy, the founder of the Barefoot College, who came up with a model that he based on demystifying technology, where the goal of the college is to equip the rural poor with the technology and the know-how that they can use to improve their own conditions. In his keynote talk, Bunker described their projects that are spread all over the world as based on a partnership with the community, where the community is involved in all aspects of the project, thus exercising collective decision making as opposed to how it is in top-down development approaches, and that they use learning by doing as their pedagogical approach. I was taken by the model and the projects he described that I made sure to meet him during the conference and ask whether he would be willing to come to Sudan. And to my delight, he was. We can now put Sudan on this celebrated map. He told us a bit about the history of the college, how it's run, but more importantly, its philosophical underpinning, which he meant as a challenge to the academics in the conference room, which I am one of. What was particularly interesting are the notions of how formal education is not a condition to become an engineer, something that I have seen through the experience of these solar mamas, who are non-literate and semi-literate rural women, mostly our grandmothers, who have never left their village. Another important distinction with academia is about the focus on the practical and not the theoretical part of life, and that the qualification of the solar mamas doesn't come in a paper form, but from the community. These distinctions were key in influencing my own pedagogy as I teach software engineering. And I will come back to that. We will now follow the story of the solar mamas and a story of their resilience against all the odds. When the project started, after Bunker's Roy visit to Khartoum in February 2009, Sudan was still one country. We selected the Nuba Mountains to be home for the projects for various reasons, mainly the effects of war on the Nuba Mountains region, and more specifically on the lives of local women, is one of the stark and dreadful marks of Sudanese conflicts on its civilian populations. The Nuba Mountains' geographic location, as whether bordering or home, bordering here, Darfur, the Blue Nile state, so there are dormant conflicts within Sudan and across the border to the New South Sudan's border, has affected the region's security and its development. And moreover, the Nuba Mountains being in the middle of the old Sudan made it easier that we thought it could spread the projects to other rural areas in all directions. After the independence of South Sudan in 2011, we can say that the project is now located in the southern part of Sudan. I will run through the story, and of course, it started with some challenges. The first challenge was the existing community perceptions about women and learning about technology, and of the women perceptions of themselves as to whether they could really become solar engineers. Once this was overcome by being shown experiences from other places and because of the determination of the community leaders, their journey to India started. And here they are in Colonia on the first day of college. Our pioneers, Haddin, Asha, Muna, and Khadija, the grandmothers from Aldarod and Miri villages in the Nuba Mountains, were among their classmates. They started their training and they were picking up and getting really excited by what they were learning. And they also got other kinds of skill training like making paper bags, chalk, toys, among others that are of course handy for income generation. There were also cultural days and entertainment which allowed the women to be exposed to other foods and customs, and they came back with stories that they had with grandmothers from Uganda or Senegal, and I was surprised since they don't speak English or French. I was told that communication doesn't only happen through language, though. Although they showed off some of the Indian and English words they picked up during the training. At the end of the trip, they were taken to see one of the wonders of the world, something that they would themselves become to their own communities. Their communities, who were at the reception on the day of their arrival in Khartoum, back from India, came in numbers. The airport was filled up with waiting relatives and friends. Some had to sit on the floor waiting to greet their solar moms, and it was indeed an emotional reunion. They came back dressed as one, as a team, with a mission, which was beautiful to see. While they waited for the solar equipment to arrive, they were invited to participate in local exhibitions and tell their stories. And when the equipment finally arrived in Neri, they went to work to assemble the solar units. And this is Khadija working, Mona, and Asha. They were never alone though. The community was curious as well as supportive. By the end of the solar electrification, 9 community members learned many of the skills involved in assembling and storing solar units. And after their hard work, the big day for the community arrived, where solar units were distributed to each household and installed. The people started to lament on what they would do now that they had electricity at night. More income, more learning, and when the night fell, the village lit for the first time. It was simply wonderful, full of joy. And after this project, we started to do another project that I will just tell you about. But before that, gone were the perceptions that grandmothers can't work technology and that formal education is a must to become an engineer. At a TEDx talk, the audience stood and clapped for a long time to Khadija when she said, "I am an engineer, not Awil," which is a local term for women. What Khadija said, I think, is not less profound than Simone de Beauvoir's quote, "I was born, then became a woman." We started a water harvesting project at the village school. There was just much to celebrate. Got a glimpse of the culture of the Nuba Mountains. We were about to move to the next village in line for the solar electrification, Khadija's and Asha's village, Aldarot. But conflict returned on the 5th of June 2011. We had solar electrified Miri in March 2011, and 3 months later, conflict re-erupted. The project was interrupted, and we were not able to proceed to Aldarot, the next village. The NGOs whom we were in partnership with, the Miri village community, were displaced and their equipment was looted in the chaos. The project stopped then for several years before resuming. This time, we kept the training component and halted the solar electrification part until there is stability and security. These are Gisma and Bakhita, who went from Angaku village, also in the Nuba Mountains, to training in 2017. They took the same route to Tilonia, got trained, visited the Taj Mahal, and in 2020, we sent 6 more women from 3 villages, Fagbusa, Kabus, and Al-Sara, and Fatuma, Hassaniya, Fatma, Kaltoum, Sumaya, Halima started their training, and they were on national TV here in Sudan and on newspapers. They became really famous. Many women in rural Africa are still tractors, mills, and water taps. They spend hours and walk distances to get water and come carrying it on their heads. Appropriate technology is an opportunity to realize this community's leaders' dream, which inspired me to write this piece, futuristic piece, imaginary, for an event. We know that the freedoms and agency that comes with electricity is not less, is a good example of what Amartya Sen work on development as freedom really espouses. Responding, the Solar Mamas and I, with the help of the Berkeley College, are now establishing a training center and a rural solar workshop where training will be available for Sudanese women from all over Sudan. No one thought they could learn. Some resisted their travel. Others laughed. But in the end, the Solar Mamas won. Their story is exactly depicted by Randy Scott. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. This is a volunteer-based project, so many people supported it along the way, and it is thanks to all of them that we survive these odds. So, what I gained as an academic, I gained many things, but I selected these 3 examples that have had a profound influence. So from Muna, I learned that knowledge is sacred. I asked her after the conflict started in June and halted the project, whether she would be interested to continue the project and whether she would still remember the work. She said, and she was appalled at my question. She said, this knowledge I got is sacred. I have to deliver it back to my community. I wonder how many graduates will say that about their university degrees. From Khadija, I learned the power of pedagogy, becoming an engineer from being a woman, which to her seems synonymous of not being able to become an engineer. And from the Berkeley College, I learned about the model enough to be able to translate it into my university teaching. This photo is at the end of our trip to a village in North Sudan. It was a no-credit class activity in the form of a service learning project where students learn as they serve a community. They learn by listening to the villagers about their problems, and they learn by doing to develop these solutions to these problems. This was done in partnership with the community, and whose satisfaction was the students' only qualification. Thank you for listening, and I hope in this presentation I managed to reflect the Sudan's Berkeley solar engineers' narratives, as well as my own journey as an academic from computer science, becoming an activist interested in technology, to developing a practical sense of liberatory pedagogy as a teacher, and writing on women, youth, and social movements as a researcher and as a searcher for a decent human world in my life. Have a good time in the conference.